All right. Whoever wants to jump in first, what does agricultural growth and stewardship mean to you?
What growth looks to me like in agriculture is for people to be able to produce food in a sustainable way for every Missourian and every person on this planet. And the stewardship aspect is to be able to do it in a way that allows us to continue to do it year over year over year in a way that is acceptable both to us as producers as well as to the world.
Agricultural growth and stewardship means both that we're taking care, so the stewardship part, so we're taking care of the land, the resources, the agricultural resources that we have, and we're starting to do more with them. That's the growth part of things.
I think we as extension agents and producers are there to help and to promote good stewards of these natural resources like the land, the water, and the soil, because once we are good stewards of these natural resources, then we can talk of growth from that point of view.
Agricultural growth means not only helping our farmers increase productivity, but also to help them with new technology so that they can grow and so that they can increase that productivity. Stewardship is just helping them preserve their soil, air, water, resources that they have for the future generations.
Agricultural growth, a lot of time refers to increasing agricultural productivity by the advancement of the technology or the adoption of modern practices. And this increase in agricultural productivity usually increase in agricultural output, which lead to increase in farmers' income. Another type of stewardship we mentioned a lot is the financial stewardship, where we provide the tools or guidelines to promote the sustainable management, to allocate financial resources which may benefit for the farm operations.
What do you mean when you say economic stewardship and land stewardship?
When you think of economic stewardship in agriculture, if people can't make a living in agriculture, or can't make money at least, it's not a long-term sustainable thing. And there was a time in history when we just extracted those resources from the land and sold our products. In the long run, you can't make a living doing that either.
For land stewardship, what comes to my mind is we went through a period in agriculture, at least, where we were depleting the resources. And now, in recent years, this stewardship word has gained a lot of attention, and even now we're talking about not just maintaining the status quo of our land, making it as good as it was last year, for example, but perhaps even making it better in the future.
I think to follow up on that, and that's one thing we're trying to get across to the people in the state when it comes to making the best use of their land in terms of diversification, incorporating species of animals, like you have your cow, you want to put in your small ruminant, because this helps, is an holistic approach. It really helps to make the best use of the resources that we've been entrusted with. So I think that's also important, for our people, the stakeholders, projects to learn how to incorporate some of these small animal species into what operations they do. It could be the crop, it could be the cattle, so that makes us to be good stewards of the land.
There is a philosophical debate on who owns the land, even if you own the land. And I think that really is what stewardship is about. Stewardship means the land was here before you got here, and it'll be here after you leave. So you're entrusted with it, not just for your own specific siblings and children, but because of in our case, all of the Missourians and Americans who come after.
The word I was trying to look for, long-term. I mean, so on the agriculture side, you're looking at this year, maybe next year. Coming from my world, a forester or a land steward, we're talking decades. And when we talk about a third of the state being forested still, and that the majority of our communities derive their drinking water from surface reservoirs. It's all integrated, but we have to think long term. We all live in the top 6 inches of soil. Only takes a year to take an inch of soil away, but it takes a century to build it back.
You could have where land stewardship and economic stewardship are not together. So if a farmer's raising corn and doesn't fertilize the ground, they can still grow corn for a year or two. And that's not really environmentally responsible without putting those nutrients back. But in the long term, that's not economically sustainable either.
This is actually a common, trying to figure out what is the economic benefit versus long-term benefit in IPM, or integrated pest management. So if you're dealing with a outbreak of a pest, is it better to try and eliminate that while also certain pesticides might also take out the beneficial organisms, and it might save your crop this year, but it might make it so that you don't have the reservoir of the beneficial organisms next year. So trying to keep that balance, understanding the cause and effect and economic benefit is going to be really important to have that discussion.
Rob Kallenbach. I know we have the goal of doubling the value of Missouri agriculture by 2030 while sustaining its natural resources. Can you explain how we got to double, how we got to 2030, and why is the sustaining natural resources in there?
Back in 2015 and 16, we did a lot of focus group work across this state, working with agricultural producers of all scales, trying to understand where should we focus our agriculture program and how is it important to the environment. And from that set of kind of diverse set of conversations across the state, we asked the group, well, all right, what can MU Extension do? How can it have a concrete goal to serve Missourians? So we came up with this goal of doubling the value of agriculture by 2030. That's really the economic development part. It's the part about saying we can produce food, we need to add value to that food. Food processing was a big part of that. By the way, processed food is worth about 6 times the value of raw food products, so there's a real chance to add economic value there. But we want to do it in a way that preserves those landscapes, that maintains that environment, that makes Missouri a great place to live.
So when we look at doubling value in environmentally responsible ways by 2030, it cannot be done by doubling production. So if we raise twice as many animals, we could not do that environmentally responsibly in Missouri. We don't have the natural resources to do that. So we do look at improving health, improving survivability. The only way to double the value is to grow that production to whatever level is environmentally responsible, and then adding value.
Value-added agriculture. What is that? Why is it important?
So I think the goal for value agriculture is to create products that will fit consumers' needs or preferences. And it's important because it allows value-added producers to find their own clients, set their own prices, and create more jobs. And more importantly, it also helps to diversify their farmers' income stream, which make them better positioned when there is a shock happen in the current market condition.
Value-added agriculture can look very different across the state. And when you think about the entire food system, there are a lot of people and agencies and entities involved. And they all are adding some value to raw product by the time it gets to consumer. As we work on value-added agriculture in Missouri, we're just trying to help producers go a little farther down the chain with the product. Some may go all the way to consumer, some may just go to the next step, whether that's instead of growing just soybean, you grow soybean that has some value that the market is willing to pay a premium for. And so it can look very different. It could also be that someone goes all the way from producing soybean to having a candy bar in a store that uses that product. All of those are possible.
How important is agriculture to Missouri? And as you answer this question, in what ways is agriculture important that people may not realize?
agriculture is the number one industry in Missouri. And agriculture is the number one industry not only because of the primary production that we have from those 100,000 farms that make up this state, but it's for those 1 in 5 jobs that are connected to food in some way. So you're involved in agriculture, whether you're planting corn or whether you're serving it in corn flakes or wherever.
A lot of people in the majority of the state don't realize the economic impact from taxes. So I live in a very rural part of a rural county, and our school district has farmland and a handful of pig barns. That's where our tax base is. If those go away, only 1 in 5 jobs goes away, but significantly more of the funding for those sorts of things goes away.
I mean, so back to a comment I made as far as our land cover. A third of the state, 15 million, north of 15 million acres is forest cover. And yet people, if it's green, it's good, but they don't realize that's a $10+ billion segment of the ag sector. When we, you know, it's more than agriculture, it's agriculture and forestry. And the products that come from there, plus the communities. I mean, a lot of our rural communities, forestry is it. I mean, the sawmill, the local mills that they have, whether it's a sawmill, whether it's a cooperage to make the barrels, and all the supporting industry around that in the heart of our Ozarks.
Agriculture is also really important in the urban areas, not just because 2/3 of the state of Missouri live in urban areas and we like to eat, because there's so many other benefits. By having urban agriculture, you have food that's right there next to the people. We have to have the big ag that can help with that, but the urban farms are really important too because the food is right there. There's more nutrition. Actually having people out in their gardens or on urban farms is really helpful for physical health as well as mental health. So it's vitally important.
Complete this sentence. Advancing Missouri agriculture looks like.
Missouri is a top 10 ag state in a lot of commodities. Part of advancing Missouri agriculture is not necessarily making us higher on that list, but making sure we reside on that list where we belong and doing that responsibly. So one of the things Extension does is help people consider new technologies. And to the extent that we're effective in our state, our leaders, we do rise on that list because we're better. Sometimes the decision is don't embrace that new technology, and that's okay too if that's the right decision. And that's one of the real keys that we help people do.
I would just speak from the perspective of our teams, which is more economic side, is advancing Missouri agriculture looks like empowering the agriculture producers to be more flexible when there is a change in the market while being informed about a new technology, new practices, how those new technology, new practices may impact their bottom lines.
To me, advancing Missouri agriculture in my area, in my job, and in really in plant sciences overall is being future focused and proactively thinking through what does agriculture look like 10 years from now.
Well, I think some of our challenges are that it's very easy for us to be reactionary, right? It's easy for, we see that we have a problem like whatever the problem might be, and now we're going to respond to it. And when we're responding to the problem that already exists, we may even be already too late. So some of those challenges are, when we're responding to drought, it's because we're already in a drought and because we already need, oh gosh, what do we do? How do we feed our cattle? How do we feed our pigs? We don't have enough forage. But really the better place to position ourselves is there's likely a drought coming, or we can, understanding what we understand, these are the things we're gonna run into. How do we start teaching people to be ready for the drought before it hits?
And I work with urban agriculture and also with a lot of volunteers. And I feel like both of those areas are integral to this growth and stewardship. So in urban agriculture, a lot of these farms are being built in places that formerly had homes or formerly were used in other ways. And so we're having to reclaim that space for agriculture. So we're having to find ways to be sustainable in the now as well as looking forward. As also with volunteers, they are some of our best assets. They are ambassadors who can take this information and they learn it themselves, they're highly trained, and then they're able to share it with others. So we're able to perpetuate that sustainability to more people than we could otherwise.
I think to what she said, I think things like hydroponics kind of agriculture, in the urban area, because we don't have the land there. But there are a lot of ways we could do things. We could grow things, we eat plants and crops, that's still sustainable in the urban area. To me, advanced Missouri agriculture looks like, and it's very, very dear to my heart, bridging the gap between the old and the new. And I see complaint from producers when it comes to who is going to take over from the farmland. Somebody told me, okay, I want to sell off my produce, I want to sell off my cattle because there's no one to take over. Why? They're in the city, looking for white-collar jobs in the city. So what do we need to do? We have to start talking about that.
Some of this is affected by the specific commodity. For example, about 15 years ago, we were working with grass dairies or pasture-based dairies, about 60 producers, 60 farms, and we asked them in a questionnaire, what is the number one benefit of going from a conventional dairy over to a pasture-based dairy? And we thought that it would be economics because the input costs are so low and the output is pretty good. But their number one response overwhelmingly was social reasons. Social reasons meaning there's not a lot of pressure on a pasture-based dairy from the urban sector, and also the children milking those cows on a pasture-based dairy were more likely to go back and work on the farm. So at least their answer was quality of life, the number one reason they went to pasture-based dairies, and that spills over into the kids.
Agriculture is a really unique industry historically, where I doubt there's another profession than a farmer that's more likely to be the profession of your parent. And that's kind of how new technologies came, right? So 4-H was really developed to take those kids and teach them things so their parents would do them. And then you needed other help. You needed people to be over here making feed or doing research. And those were important, and those tended to be kids that came from big families. And they still wanted to be in agriculture, but the farm wouldn't support them. And so today, the technology is coming faster. The kids aren't turning over faster, so they're not coming back with that technology. So a lot of those aren't getting it. We have a lot of kids whose parents are farmers, but the kids are never on the farm because of the technology and the specialization. And so we're losing that connection. And so in animal science, which is the department I work in at Mizzou, almost 3/4 of our students come to us wanting to go to veterinary school. Over half of them come from Kansas City and St. Louis, and they're going to be dog and cat vets because they've never thought of the opportunities that exist in livestock production. They don't half of them go to vet school. They see other opportunities, and one of our challenges to growing them is helping agriculture now compete with pick any other career you want, and helping them recognize this as a career path.
So it was mentioned that we need to do a better job of retaining talent in agriculture. And it seems to me when we don't retain that talent that it affects the smaller producers, those smaller family farms, more than the larger producers. Can y'all explain to me the importance of those smaller family farms, smaller producers to agriculture and to the state more largely?
I wanted to mention that in the urban area that I'm at, a lot of the small farmers are young with young families. And so I see them taking on agriculture, but maybe not in the conventional sense. From a biodiversity perspective, they fill a niche that is really critical. So having a lot of different plants and sometimes it's heirlooms that they will be producing, even if there are plants that have resistance, because heirloom tastes better. Mm-hmm. And so there are reasons to grow a lot of different kinds of plants, and those small family farms are doing that.
So I think that's really interesting there, where, we talk about agriculture in some ways as being like the monoculture, where we've focused on one thing and we do that one thing really well. And then on the other hand, we have smaller proprietors or family farms where we might have more niche producing, maybe the heirloom things. And they're, instead of doing one thing and doing it perfectly well, they do a lot of things that they do well, but maybe they could do one of those better if they spent more time on it. But it really, by having both of those sides, by having the big that does the one and the small that does the many, we've got a lot of resiliency there. We've got a lot of ability to adapt. So, if something happens to the big monoculture, okay, well, something happened to everything then. And the small farmers that are doing something different have the ability maybe then to assist and bring things back. Whereas there's a reason that we do some of the big monoculture stuff. We have people that raise pigs that only raise pigs because they can get good at it, they can spend less time on it, they can get better pigs from fewer inputs, but they're also maybe more susceptible in some cases if something happens to, if there's a big drought or if there's a big disease that we might be worried about. So we need both. We need the big and we need the small. We need all the resiliency that we can get.
Well, then intermeshed in those small family farms is the back 40, the back 20 of woods. That 15 million acres, 12.6 of those, 12.6 million are owned by about 400,000 Missourians. And that average size is anywhere, the bulk of that is in that 20, 40, 60, up to about 200, but that's the hump. But those are the back, again, the 40 acres, and you can be productive on those 40 acres. People look at the forest as being a once-in-a-lifetime income generator. Doesn't have to be that way. It can be periodic incomes. It's not going to be annual, but it's going to be part of the mix, and it is that intermeshed on the small farms that you don't see on the large because, again, it's a different objective.
Vast majority of the 100,000 farms in Missouri are owned by families. And they do provide a lot of economic diversity, I'll call it, in terms of they produce a lot of different top 10 crops or things that are maybe not even in the top 10. But as we think about things like shifting climate, as we think about shifting markets, and we've had plenty of that in the supply chain issues in which we've dealt with, we add a lot of resiliency with that kind of diversity.
Thinking about the next 10 years of agriculture in Missouri, what needs to happen in the next 10 years? What challenges do we see in the way, and what needs to happen to address those challenges?
If we don't weed the garden now, the bumper crop of oaks that we saw 2 years ago, they can hang in there for about 10 years. And if we don't get light to the forest floor, if we don't remove some of the competition, whether that's good or bad species, we won't have the oaks that dominate our forest today. It changes. We can't, succession time marches on. And so our forest will have trees. They just won't look like they do now, and it might be one that our economy, at least on the forest side, is predominated by our oak and our hickory products that we make and that the country has. So we need to raise awareness that folks need to start doing something now and giving them the tools to do that.
Let me just maybe toss in on that a little. If I look at the challenges over the next 10 years, I'll just say that shifting climate's going to be a big part of how we have to adapt.
That's right.
Whether that means we're going to have more frequent droughts or we're going to have rainfall events that are of high intensity, we're going to have to build systems that are resilient to those shifts. Yeah. And those may be planting warm season grasses, they may be replacing toxic tall fescue, they may be planting perennial crops where we have annual ones now, or using cover crops more, or more terraces, or thinking about how we use technology and animal systems to keep animals more comfortable during cold periods or during heat stress. All of those are opportunities, but they're big challenges for us to take on. I'll say another big challenge that'll be for us in the next 10 and maybe longer years is being sure we're building the right kind of human capital and talent to lead agriculture. And that's something that we as a university are really interested in, but if there's any way in which Extension can be successful, it'll be able to not only tell people about the great technologies, but to build leaders that can lead this state for implementation of those technologies, as has been pointed out.
Yeah, just a follow-up to what Rob said, I think this is very practical because we speaking to stakeholders. I had a meeting just 2 weeks ago. I sat on a panel, and we had a meeting on drought mitigation strategies, and you could see the whole room was so full because people want to know what to do, how to mitigate, because these, I believe, is an ongoing problem, and of course, they spoke about that, that we need to actually address. So we need to start talking about what do we need to do, as they say things about cover crops and stuff, but what are the solutions, practical solutions, is an ongoing discussion, and I think MU Exchange is doing that, and we're going to continue to do that. Number 3 is animal disease and threats, because we have both existing diseases and emerging diseases, just like COVID-19. Nobody expected that to happen, and of course, you could see the effects of that on the economy. How much more we have animal diseases that are not in existence now, but are just sure. So we have to start talking to veterinarians and start preparing.
Well, I think some of our challenges are that it's very easy for us to be reactionary, right? It's easy for, we see that we have a problem, like whatever the problem might be, and now we're going to respond to it. And when we're responding to the problem that already exists, we may even be already too late. So some of those challenges are, when we're responding to drought, it's because we're already in a drought and because we already need, oh gosh, what do we do? How do we feed our cattle? How do we feed our pigs? We don't have enough forage. But really the better place to position ourselves is there's likely a drought coming, or we can, understanding what we understand, these are the things we're gonna run into. How do we start teaching people to be ready for the drought before it hits? So that when it hits, okay, it's a drought and we know how to deal with this. Along with David's, talk about animal health, that's another thing that, again, we, utilizing technology to be able to mitigate some of those problems is great. But being able to try and look down and see what's coming next and being prepared for that is very important.
And the trick is working with those early adopters. The average folk won't listen to us, per se. But working with those early adopters, so the farmer or the forest landlord looks across the fence and go, okay, it works, so I'm gonna do it. But, it's not a light switch. And I think that's, Extension's always done that. It's finding those early adopters, working with them, and building those bridges.
All right, give the person next to you a high five.
High five.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Now we can't move because we're wired.